Turn 1 Soul Ring.
So do you guys remember at the end of the Wrath and Storm story where the Weatherlight travels through the erratic portal to escape?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was doing a little research, and the card Mind Over Matter, the art depicts like Urza and the erratic portal there, and the Weatherlight's on its way through it. And I'm pretty sure that Urza was there on Wrath and, you know, was watching events unfold and, you know, I think, like, if you look at the art for Mind Over Matter, there's a little, like, Soltari creature there. And, you know, Urza is like, well, you know, send him through, just, you know, do the thing. So he was there that whole time, or at least he was watching over events and could have intervened for the good, but he's like, no, I just got to take a step back, which I think is really odd. You know,
I'm
he's
too old for this.
Yeah, he's getting to, maybe that was it. He's just getting too old for it. He's getting too old for it. But that was just a little bit of a story spotlight. I was going through my Azami deck and looking at that card, and I'm like, that's the erratic portal. What's going on there? So I just did a little bit of backstory research there.
It's like he knows what needs to happen, and what's happening there needs to happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, we just keep waiting.
Right. And I think that's something about the flavor text, like something like as always we wait, which hasn't really been his style up to that point. But regardless, welcome everyone to the show. This is Turn 1 Soul Ring. I'm Kevin.
Hey, I'm Eric.
I'm Riley.
And we have our editor and guest host, Ainsley, joining us.
Hello, everyone.
And that means that we are, today and over the next few episodes, we're going to be continuing our lore series by explaining the events depicted in the Magic the Gathering novel Mercadian Masques, which was written by Francis Leberon. It was originally published in 1999 as the sequel to Wrath and Storm and Book 2 in the Weatherlight cycle. And like we mentioned when we covered Wrath and Storm, WotC ended up nixing that cycle, so Wrath and Storm became a standalone book, and Mercadian Masques became book 1 in the Masquerade cycle. And the books that follow Mercadian Masques in the cycle, which we'll cover in the future, are connected, but instead of one following the other, each book takes place concurrently in the context of the larger story of the multiverse. So
Interesting.
if at any point during these episodes you find yourself wondering what happened to those characters left behind on Wrath, those are the events depicted in the in book 2, and well, that's book 2 of the Masquerade cycle, and then, you know, we'll talk about book 3 in the future, but regardless, we'll have to wait to find out what happens to those characters. But Wrath and Storm and Mercadian Masques are actually, it sort of puzzles me why they made this decision, because it's a really great 1-2 punch, you know, 2-part series, even more so than like the artifact cycle that we've covered in the past. So if you just want a really good kind of what's a good oh, you know what, The Godfather. If you want like a Godfather 1, Godfather 2 experience with magic, read Wrath and Storm and then Mercadian Masques, and you're good. You really don't need to read anything else. Just ignore Godfather Part 3, which is what we all do.
Maybe the third book was written and it was crap.
Well, the next book is good. I haven't gone all the way into Prophecy, but Nemesis is a good book. And we find out what happens to like Krovax and Erte and all the other characters left on Wrath, but there's just no connection. So it's cool how they did it, but for whatever reason, they just ended up making Wrath and Storm a standalone story. But anyways, this book, Mercadian Masques, picks up right where Wrath and Storm ended, with Weatherlight and what was left of her crew arriving on the other side of the erratic portal. And where did the portal send them, you ask? I know you're all asking.
I was asking.
Yeah.
Where?
A plane that was appropriately called Mercadia.
Why do you think that like most sea vessels are female?
Well, even cars are female.
Why is that?
And
'Cause you
planes are
ride
female, like
them?
vessels are female. I think it is because you
'Cause
ride them or you
you-
ride in them.
Yeah, you get inside
You get in
them.
them, you get inside
You get
them.
up on that deck.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know
think
what
that's-
deck is, but yeah, there's something in there. I think.
yeah, I think it is. I think we figured
There's
it
always
out.
something in the deck.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but it is sort of like, I don't know. Maybe we should take it back and be like, it's like, oh, it's like you got a really nice, Honda Civic here. She gets pretty good mileage, and you're like, that Honda Civic's a he.
Nice.
I don't know.
Actually, my car prefers they.
Yeah, yes, that's well, it's probably gonna be more of that. Like it's like my car identifies as they.
Yeah.
Yeah, or my plane, or whatever. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Just one of those days.
One of those days.
Yeah. So Mercadia was a plane close to Dominaria, relatively speaking, and there were several different controlling factions on the plane, sort of like nations. But in truth, the plane was ruled from Mercadia City, which sat atop the inverted Mount Mercadia.
Oh, it's inverted. What the hell?
It's inverted, so it's
Oh,
like the top of a mountain, the point of a mountain that broke off and landed in the plane, point down, and then on the top, or like what is the top of the plane? That's where Mercadia City is.
Oh, cool.
Neat.
I thought it was inverted, like it was like in on itself. Like you could go inside it, like those empty volcanoes that you do in a science project before you pour the baking soda and vinegar in. Like I thought it was like in.
Okay, yeah,
But I like that
in the
one.
actual mountain. Like it's a hollow
yeah,
mountain.
it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a great descriptor, because when I was reading the novel, I was like, huh.
But also, if you're in an inverted spot, like that would really suck if it rains.
Oh yeah, it would just
yeah.
fill
Some
up.
pools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you need some drains.
Yeah.
So the city's leadership was corrupted by the Kirin. Those are the goblin creatures, the goblins of Mercadia, and they were the ruling class in the city and on the plane, essentially. They controlled the magistrate of the city, who was just a figurehead, just a big fat guy. It's important to point out that on this plane, goblins were among the highest class of beings, while on most other planes, specifically Dominaria, they were the opposite. So needless to say, this was a welcome change of pace for Weatherlight's cabin boy, Squee.
Hey.
The mountain's upside down, the hierarchy's upside down.
Yeah,
Fun.
it's like they were doing something,
It's like imagery.
Yeah.
It's like a metaphor. Yeah.
No, and like this, and the thing is, the story behind this set is really great, as is the case with a lot of these early sets. But this was this set was very reviled, like Mercadian Masque. It was much like Kamigawa, but I think that was more because Mercadian Masques and Kamigawa followed extremely powerful sets, so people
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, this is underpowered. I don't like it."
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, very, very, very strong story. So shortly after Weatherlight arrived on Mercadia, she crashed due to the damage she'd taken during her second encounter with Predator and poor piloting on Gerard's part. Sissa was still a little under the weather, so she couldn't take the wheel. But the vessel crashed near a dry riverbed on a farmer's field, basically in the middle of nowhere. So, never having seen a flying ship before, the farmer Tavut and his 10-year-old son Atala approached the vessel, wondering where it came from. And that's something that often strikes me as kind of unbelievable. If I had like an acreage or a farm and some kind of alien vessel that I had no idea what it was crashed into my land, I don't know, the first thing that I would do was go and investigate it with my children in tow. So, it's like, maybe just
That's
see what
fair.
happens,
Yeah.
get out the binoculars.
Yeah, I feel
so
I feel like
curious.
it's like, oh
be
shit,
harmless.
like this ship
Well,
just crashed. Like I'm gonna
Riley,
check this
you
out.
live in the country. That doesn't count. So, anyway, when Tavut and Atala went to investigate the crash site, they found a pretty beat-up crew, All the main players were safe, if not a bit injured. 5 crew members were killed in the crash. 4 others were injured badly enough to need bed rest, while 2 more sustained such severe head and neck injuries that Orem refused to allow them to be moved.
Oof.
That's a good call.
You got to stay in that wreck.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you don't want to move like a spinal
No.
injury, right?
No, that's fair.
No, it's a spinal job. So, in addition to all that, a large part of Weatherlight's hull was pulverized in the crash. Seeing all this, Tavut offered Weatherlight's crew any help he could provide. He let them put the 4 injured crewmen in his stable to rest and help the crew unload other supplies they would need to make a camp and repair Weatherlight.
That's kind.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy. Which, to Riley's point, it's a good move. Not what I would do, but good move. I think that probably says more about Riley and I than anything else. So
You're just not a farmer.
yeah, I'm not a farmer. So while Takara, who was the wrathy woman, Stark's daughter that they rescued at the end of Wrath and Storm, while she was helping the newly injured Stark off Weatherlight, because remember he's blind now, Gerard commented how graceful the wrathy woman seemed in the stressful situation they were in, and how much she seemed to care for Stark. And this was her response.
My father, the father I loved and grew up with, is a different man than this husk. My father is dead. That doesn't mean I shouldn't honor him by caring for this poor creature.
Shaking his head in wonder, Gerard felt again the sense of connection.
You've lost so much, and you still fight on.
What else is there for heroes to do?
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from that. You'll just be a hero. Just do what Takara would do. So, all the unloading of supplies and the injured men took up most of the daylight hours, and by the time the sun went down, Weatherlight's crew was finding out about the plane they had just arrived on from Tavut and Atala. They were all sitting around a fire Gerard had built with wood from Weatherlight's hull. They got to use something, right? It's kind of
might as well burn
it's kind
it.
of insensitive.
Just burn it.
And the thing is, it was, I guess going back to time streams, it was built from the weather seed, so it should continue to grow if you take parts of it off. I think that's how it works. I don't know how, continuatively they're concerned, but I think that should work.
Yeah, because it was the wasn't the metal keeping it constrained so it wouldn't just keep growing?
Right. Well, the metal and the wood both grow over time,
Yeah.
so the two of them together stop each other from overgrowth.
Yeah. So if you take them both apart, it should just.
Not to be too convention nerd about this, I would never get Francis Lebaron in a corner and be like, well, if he or she is still alive and ask them about this, but I think it's.
But
fine.
I mean, in a way, if the ship's broken, you just take those parts off, they grow some more, you have more supplies, and you just re-put it back together.
Yeah, you got tons of wood.
Yeah, for fire.
So they were all sitting around the fire, except of course the 4 crew members that were resting in Tavut's stables, and Orem, who is still in Weatherlight with her 2 injured patients. And that's when the Cho Aram arrived.
Ooh.
So the Cho Aram were one of the aforementioned controlling factions on Mercadia. They were considered rebels by those that ruled Mercadia, the magistrate, Kieran, all them. But they were just a group of people that were more interested in living among the natural world. They also worshipped the dragon engine Ramos, a character that we'll explain further as we go. They lived in Rushwood, a forest located southwest of Mercadia City. The forest was itself a living entity, a trope that Magic has used many times before. And much like the elves and forests of Dominaria that we've talked about in this series before, the Cho Aram had an arrangement with Rushwood, where they would protect the forest, and the forest would protect them.
I scratch your back and you scratch mine.
Exactly.
That's right.
Tale as old as time.
Don't. That's good. Yeah. That's excellent. Okay, this Cho Aram guy at the front of the pack, tell me that's not Charles Grodin.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
He
who
just
that
died.
is.
The
Yeah, me
guy,
neither.
the dad from Beethoven.
Beethoven. Yeah, he's also the guy that Robert De Niro was after in Midnight Run.
Is this
Haven't
ringing?
seen Midnight Run, and it's been a long time since I've seen Beethoven.
Yeah, you're talking about Beethoven, like the dog?
The dogs?
Roll over
Yes, the dog.
Beethoven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that beloved childhood film, Beethoven and Beethoven Second, starring Charles Grodin.
Well, we know who Charles Grodin is. The listeners, some of them know who Charles Grodin is.
Or you'll Google it.
Yeah, or just Google it. I'm pretty sure he wore a wig his entire career. Nobody ever talked about it, but I'm pretty sure it was a wig. So, not that there's anything wrong with that. Just if you're going to wear a wig, do it Andy Warhol style and make sure everyone knows you're wearing a wig. Make it a hat. That's what I'm going to do when I need a wig. So, in addition to protection, the Cho-Aram's bond with the natural world and their inherent magical ability allowed certain members of their tribe the power to manipulate water.
Ooh.
And they also possessed pretty powerful healing magic. But again, we'll get to that in a little bit.
So
So
they're like waterbenders.
yeah, they are like waterbenders. Yeah, very much so. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Are they gonna heal the hurt guys?
No.
No, like
Not-
I see he's got
not
a
right
broken
now.
neck. Oh, too bad.
Oh.
Hey. Okay.
What are you
So-
going to do for me?
So, the Cho-Aram were using their water magic when they arrived on Tavoot's farm. While Weatherlight's crew was sitting around that fire, they were suddenly inundated with clouds of thick mist, which turned to heavy rain, which then turned into a torrential downpour. So we're talking like sheets of rain that you couldn't even see through. So like if I could put this into perspective, like the Matrix Revolutions, I had to think about the third one there because it sucks. But at the end, where Neo is fighting all the Agent Smiths, and it's all like the green lighting. Imagine that and all that rain, but no light. That's what we're talking about here. It's just a little fire.
That
So-
would,
Wow.
that would be a nice rain to stand in, Just
Yeah,
like
if you want to get like washed off, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. So Gerard and his crew could see dark figures in the storm, and those were the Cho-Aram, who could move through the mist almost like it's sort of like when wizards disapparate in Harry Potter. So they just
Oh,
kind
whoa.
of like they can move with the storm that they're creating. They're really cool. They're like my favorite part of the story.
that's pretty cool.
So Weatherlight's crew did their best to stay on guard, but they realized too late that what the Cho-Aram were after was Weatherlight herself. So remember that dry riverbed we mentioned, the one that Weatherlight had crashed near? Well, the arrival of all that precipitation, with the arrival of all that precipitation, the riverbed began to fill with water. And as it did, the bank that Weatherlight was on began to erode, and before they knew it, the ship was floating away on the newly formed river with Orem and her patients
Oh,
aboard.
they should have burned it
Nice.
quicker.
And they should have, yeah, they just should have burned the ship. Yeah.
Yeah. I like
So-
how they just like come by. They're like, "This is mine now."
Yeah, well, if you got the water magic. So Hannah and some other crew members had been able to repair Weatherlight's damaged hull earlier in the day, but she knew that the ship was probably taking on water as it floated away because the repairs were done with flying in mind, not floating. And try as they might, the crew couldn't catch up with the ship, but just as it began to pick up speed, it stopped, and Gerard could see something glinting in the moonlight near the front of Weatherlight's keel. And at first, he thought it might be some kind of sandbar in the riverbed, but as he and his fellow crew members ran after their ship, they saw that it was the Silver Man himself,
Yeah.
Arn.
Hell yeah.
Way.
So the golem was able to hold the ship in place for a few seconds, but the weight of it made him quickly sink into the freshly soaked riverbed. Karn scratched at Weatherlight's hull as he sank, but with nothing to grasp onto, the ship flowed with the river and with the storm the Cho-Aram created. It was just the hull was just too smooth. Thanks,
He
Urza.
tried.
Yeah, he did. He tried his best. It's kind of Karn's like thing, right? He just tries his best.
Oh.
And it wasn't until Weatherlight was long gone that Gerard discovered 3 crew members dead and 3 more missing, abducted by the storm. Not to mention the 3 that were aboard Weatherlight when she floated away. Gerard and the rest of Weatherlight's crew had no idea who had taken their ship, but Tavoot and Atala informed them all about the Cho-Aram and where they lived. So Gerard planned to take what was left of his crew and head for Rushwood to get his ship back. So that's what happened on the ground. And remember that Orym was on Weatherlight with it as it was being stolen, which meant that she was the first crew member to encounter the Cho Aram face to face. So once Weatherlight was rushing down the newly formed river and Orym had regained her composure from the ship's initial movements, several of the Cho Aram raiders invaded her sickbay. Oh, and I should also mention that the 2 crew members that were severely injured, all the movement of the vessel when it started to rush down the river, it was kind of violent, and they just died from being like shook around and like banged on stuff. It's kind of violent in the novel. These novels are a lot more violent than like a 13 plus. Maybe I'm just a dad, but I don't think that these are really rough novels sometimes.
Yeah. They don't make violent novels like they used to.
They really don't. No, they really don't. 13 plus is not what it used to. 13 plus now, I feel like, especially like in mangas and stuff or comics, it's like 18 plus now. So I guess that's a good thing. The Cho Aram raiders invaded the sickbay, and the raiders were led by their charismatic leader, Cho Mano. A name that I love, by the way. What a great name.
What a mano.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, Mano, give me your blessing.
Oh, Mano. So Cho Mano was the spiritual and political leader of the Cho Aram people. He was extremely skilled in the aforementioned water magic as well as healing magic, and he was the one that was responsible for the tidal storm that Weatherlight's crew had just experienced. So he's kind of a terrorist. He basically told Orym that she and her crew members would not be harmed if they cooperated, even though the 2 guys were dead.
Yeah, he successfully killed a few guys. Yeah, washed 3 others away, killed 3 others off the ship.
Well, you will be okay.
Yeah, and the 3 guys that washed away, one of them was still alive. So. It's him and Orym.
I think he should try negotiating before he attacks.
No, I like that just coming in with the water storm. Just it's a surprise.
I'm gonna flush out the week, and we'll just go from there. Yeah.
And I get this hot lady healer out of the deal. So when Weatherlight finally arrives at the Cho Aram village deep in the Rushwood forest, a canoe was waiting to take them to shore. Once they arrived in their village, Orym and her uninjured crew members were taken to cells where they were kept until the Cho Aram decided what to do with them. Orym shared a cell with only one other crew member, a young man named Klars.
Klars?
Well, you gotta hit it's a double A. You gotta hit it like a Scandinavian name. When he arrived, he already had a broken arm that Orym had splinted before all this happened, and one of the Cho Aram healers decided that it would be better to remove the arm rather than simply let it heal.
What? Like,
what?
Who are these people?
What
kind of healing magic is this?
Just cut it off.
I'm gonna cut it off.
I'm a healer. Just cut it off.
Yeah. Haven't Riley? Obviously, you've never had warts. Just cut them off.
They have the healing power of what's that when you like singe a wound?
Oh, cauterize.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have the healing power of cauterizing. So once Klars's arm was safely amputated by the healer, he was put in the same cell as Orym. Taking exception to the unnecessary surgery, Klars planned to escape the cell and take a little revenge on the healer or anyone he can get his hand on.
My arm, goddammit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
So interested only in their survival, Orym tried to dissuade Klars of his plan, but when a Cho Aram woman named Ishada brought the 2 food and drink, Klars quickly grabbed the woman by the neck with his good arm and began to squeeze. Not before she was able to release a scream that alerted a nearby guard, though. The guard was in the cell almost as soon as Ishada screamed. Can you do a little scream for us? Ah! Good, thank you. He drew his sword and lunged at Klars. Klars used the woman as a sort of human shield, and still choking her through all this, which worked quite well because instead of the guard's sword wounding Klars, it landed in Ishada's side where blood started pooling immediately. Not to mention the fact that she was starting to turn blue from air loss. Klars ordered the guard to drop his sword or he would kill Ishada, and I guess the guard couldn't see that she was already close to death, so he dropped the sword and raised his hands in surrender. which is something I always love, the raising your hands in surrender. I don't know why. It tickles me.
Don't shoot.
Yeah.
It shows that you're not reaching for a weapon.
Oh, don't. Yeah, it's like, just like do a roll
I got nothing
and
in
get
my
him.
hands. It's like when, you know.
No, like a lunge, like dive. Like,
No,
Well, they don't teach lunges in Guard Academy.
That's right.
So Klars walked over to the guard, grabbed the sword, and dropped Ishada. The guard moved to catch the limp woman when Klars used the sword to cut off one of the guard's arms, covering Ishada in the guard's blood.
Nice.
Yeah. Talk about revenge. Yeah, you gotta get that revenge, even if it's not on the person who did it to you.
Yeah.
So
Moral of the story.
no.
If I can't have arms, nobody
But
can.
this guy, that's Klars's moral. So
Klars goes on to take people's arms. At the end.
So Orym moved quickly to staunch the blood from the guard's arm, and Klars screamed at her to let the guard die. He's upset. Who wouldn't be? So it didn't matter though, because by the time Klars was leaving the cell, the guard had passed out from blood loss, and then he died.
Oh shit.
He did.
Yeah. You guys thought he was gonna survive? He's done.
I like that. You could, it could have just said like the guard died from blood loss, but he passed out from blood loss, and then he died.
So, thinking she would have more success in saving Ishada from her injuries, Orym went to the unconscious woman's body and began to administer first aid. Orym was able to stop the bleeding from the wound in Ishada's side, and she also administered what sounds like mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to the Cho Aram woman, and she saved Ishada's life. And then Orym's altruism didn't serve her too well at first, because after Klars left their cell with his stolen sword, he was successful in killing 2 warriors, in addition to the guard that he had killed in the cell by cutting off his arm. And eventually he was disarmed and put in chains, and surprisingly that took most of the night. That whole thing. I imagine him like ha with his sword and just like, no, you're not gonna get me. I imagine that took most of the time.
Just like a few hours of
a few hours of parrying attacks.
Yeah, just a lot of parrying.
Yeah.
So by the morning, both Klars and Orym were on their knees awaiting execution. The executioner took off Klars's head first, so he's dead. He's done.
Okay.
It rolled.
And
by
then he
Klars.
It rolled in front of Orym, and Ishada appeared and did her best, explaining how Orym had tried to save her and the guard the night before. He
passed out from head loss, and then he died.
And then he died. Yes, Riley. Yes.
So having proven her loyalty and more importantly value, Chomano ordered the executioner to stand down, and Orym was set free, but she still had to live with them in Rushwood, so she wasn't completely free.
not like free, but has her life.
Hey, she's not getting executed.
Yeah. Keep your head.
Nice. Keep your head about ya.
Keep your head up. So now we're going to return to the bulk of Weatherlight's crew the morning after she was stolen. So that morning, Gerard began to dig graves for the crew that died in the attack. Takara approached him, grabbed a shovel, and jumped into the grave he was digging. The two then had the first in a series of intimate exchanges that were peppered throughout this story.
Intimate, eh?
It's a little intimate, so you can make it a little sexy.
I don't want any help.
I know.
Takara said, even as she flung a shovelful out of the hole.
But you don't want the others to help because they don't understand what you're doing. They tell you to let go of guilt and regret, but I know you can't. I know you can't because I couldn't either. I survived wrath not by letting go of guilt, regret, and anger, but by clinging to them. They are powerful magic, indeed, black and powerful. You can't get rid of them, Gerard, so you have 2 choices. You can let them rule you, or you can rule them.
He paused and stared amazedly at Takara. She returned his gaze.
Every time I think of Father, of the man I loved, who was stolen away from me by a spoiled and vengeful monster, my hatred strengthens me. Hatred and fury. They perfect me, prepare me to kill that monster. And when the black magic is complete, I will rip his throat out.
She's spicy. She's spicy. So,
Fuck.
so Gerard told her that he basically planned to do the same to Volrath, and that's when the Mercadians arrived. From the grave they were digging, Gerard and Takara could hear the footfalls of what sounded like several dozen jovels. You guys want to know what jovels are?
Are they the
No.
cats?
Big
Yeah.
kitty.
They're like the horse version of
They're like horses?
horses on Mercadia. So they're great big cats, large enough to ride, large enough for a couple people to ride actually, and they have an extra pair of legs. So they're cats with like 2 legs, or 6 legs, but the extra pair of legs are close to the back legs.
Like hind legs?
Yeah.
Cool. So it's like how in the desert you ride a camel, in India you ride a elephant, and Mercadia you ride a cat.
Yeah, you're right, Jovel, but it's like JH, so it's like Jovel.
Jehovah.
Oh,
Jehovah.
Jehovah. Like a Jehovah Witness.
Jehovah's Witness.
So, anyways, by the time both Gerard and Takara climbed out of the grave they were digging, they and the rest of the crew could see what looked like a dust storm rushing toward their location. It was about 200 of Mercadia City's finest, although they looked pretty rough.
So like we've already had like 2 storms in this book. We had a sandstorm.
Well, this isn't a storm. This
Well,
is just, it's so dusty that all their
from the guys walking.
clomping
Okay.
is making it dusty.
Okay, but there was a rainstorm.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any storms in Rathen's storm.
That's a good point.
No, there wasn't. And there's no set called Storm. There's nothing called Storm. I mean, there's a mechanic called Storm. That is a really good point.
And
I mean, there's
also
Tempest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
like that's a euphemism for a storm.
I looked
Yeah.
up the word
Why didn't they call
mask.
it? Why didn't they call it Wrath and Tempest? Doesn't sound as good.
No, it doesn't.
No, it sounds good.
It could be like storm, like a storm is brewing, like maybe that was it. But
Storm's
Mercadian
brewing.
or so Bruin, Mercadian masks. It's not spelt like wear your masks before you go out in public. It's mask like MASQU.
Yeah, it's like how we spell checks.
There you go. But it actually is a different word. It's a form of a festive courtly entertainment that flourished in the 16th and early 17th century Europe. So I don't know if it's just sort of like a fun spelling of like facial mask and that's
Right.
why they picked it, or if it actually has some, meaning of this sort of masquerade.
Well, I think that's sort of the
That's
the
what the set symbol
experience-
looks like.
Yeah. Yes.
Like
yes,
like it's one of
yeah.
those party
It's like, it's like a masquerade
okay.
mask.
well,
mask. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the masquerade cycle. Yeah.
Then it makes sense.
So, like I mentioned, the Mercadian soldiers, the Mercadian guard, they looked pretty rough. They had threadbare uniforms. They were covered in dust and grime, and based on how they rode their jovels, Gerard and the rest of the crew thought they were probably ill-trained. So Gerard ordered his crew to form a defensive perimeter, and just as he did, the Mercadians arrived and surrounded them. So they're like pretty not terribly outnumbered, but they're outnumbered. So once Weatherlight's crew and the Mercadians had taken their respective positions, there was a long silence as the two groups sized one another up. Then the leader of the Mercadians spoke in a language that none of Weatherlight's crew could understand. Gerard told the lead Mercadian that they couldn't understand what the hell he was saying, and the Mercadian repeated what he said to the crew. So Atal informed Gerard that he was speaking High Mercadian, the language that all Mercadian nobles spoke. Being farmers, Tavut and Atala couldn't understand it any better than Gerard and the rest of the crew, but Takara told Gerard that she thought she could understand enough of the language to communicate with the lead Mercadian. Takara claimed that High Mercadian sounded similar to some of the Rathi dialects she was familiar with, which would make sense since there was a portal between the two planes. A little curious there. Anyway, based on her translation, Takara told Gerard what the lead Mercadian said.
They claim our ship as property of the chief magistrate of Mercadia, Gods bless and keep his name in their eternal roll of glory.
She couldn't entirely remove the sarcasm from her voice.
I told him he was too late, that the Choerim had already taken the ship. He then declared us under arrest and commanded us to lay down our arms and surrender.
Arrest? On what charge?
Gerard hissed. Takara spoke once more to the soldier, who replied with an imperious air. She translated.
The charges include, but are not limited to, invasion, illegal migration, arms smuggling, trafficking with the enemies of Mercadia, refusal to speak High Mercadian.
Last one.
Refusal.
Seems like shouldn't be a charge. So Gerard's response was to order his crew to attack the Mercadians. Weatherlight's crew was more than a match for the poorly trained Mercadian troops, but the disparity in numbers was something that even they couldn't overcome. Realizing this, after a few minutes of fighting and killing quite a few Mercadians, Gerard ordered his crew to stand down and surrender, but not before Gerard made a deal with the lead Mercadian.
So, like, during the fight, he, like, made a deal before
Well,
surrendering?
it's like hey, like let's tamp this fight down. I'm gonna talk to this guy, and if it doesn't work out, we're gonna keep fighting.
Okay.
Gerard called Takara over to communicate with him, though. Gerard told her to tell him.
We submit. We'll lay down our weapons and go with him on condition that our sick will be treated, well treated, and our dead buried with proper ceremony.
The lead Mercadian agreed to the terms. Gerard and his crew were put in shackles and placed on Jovelback for the ride back to Mercadia City.
Jovelback? Like horseback?
It's like horseback, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, just hop up on my Jovel.
Hop up on my cat.
They were lucky enough to have killed enough Mercadians that they could all ride on Jovelback to Mercadia City, but before they started their ride, the lead Mercadian ordered his men to throw the dead, both Dominarian and Mercadian, over the edge of a nearby ravine. Gerard, taking exception to this clear violation of the deal they'd made, ordered that his crew be set free and that their deal was off. Knowing that Gerard was in no position to make demands, the lead Mercadian ordered everyone to move out. Except, of course, for Tavut and Atala. They stayed behind at their humble farm, waiting for the next airship to fall from the sky.
They're probably like, what the fuck just happened?
Now they have these, like, open graves and, like, dead bodies.
Yeah. All over their farm.
It's like,
On their
okay,
land.
a ship falls from the sky, a bunch of water benders come and sweep it away, then like a high army comes and like fights and arrests these people. Like, what is going on?
I mean, I assume that the waterbender stuff and like the cat army comes every other day. I think the thing that's most surprising to them is the airship.
Yeah.
I think
just
they're
another
pretty
day.
used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Weatherlight's crew and Mercadians alike made the long trek back to Mercadia City on Jovelback. And so in terms of the landscape, imagine nothing but a flat, dry, dusty plain as far as the eye can see, with dust storms tearing their way across the plain. These are real storms. They're not made-up storms.
Oh, good.
So that's what Gerard, his crew, and the Mercadians were traveling through. And I would have thought it would have been difficult to maintain the right direction, but it's a completely flat plain, and then you just have like the inverted triangle tip of Mount Mercadia sitting on the horizon. So I guess that made things relatively easy.
You can always tell what direction because you have that. It's like the North Star.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. So when they arrived at the outskirts of the city, Gerard and the rest of the crew were met with the almost unbearable scent of rotting trash. The smell was emitting from the wall of trash and waste that surrounded the outskirts. The wall constantly melted in the heat and was rebuilt as residents of the city regularly poured and dumped trash and waste on the people that lived below.
Wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
So that's I think that's a great representation of a social hierarchy, right? Everybody on top just dumps their shit and trash. And pee-pee on everybody else.
Pee-pee.
Yeah. And they're using like cloth diapers, so you're scraping those out and then like dumping them down. So anyways. The outskirts of Mercadia City were basically a giant market or bazaar that surrounded the point of the inverted mountain that was sunk into the ground, and the only way to travel to the city above was through a series of large elevators that could lift as many as 40 people at once. And this is where we get a specific number of what was left of Weatherlight's crew. Once the Mercadian soldiers and their chained captives moved past the trash wall and through the sprawling market, they reached the lifts and waited until 2 of them became available. When they did, 20 Mercadian soldiers and 20 Weatherlight captives each filled the 2 lifts. Just before the doors of the lift that Gerard occupied slammed shut, he saw a familiar face in the crowd that had formed to watch the foreigners. The farmer's son, Atala. He'd followed them on his own jovel to the city. At that point, Gerard turned to Takara, who was standing next to him in the lift, and began to explain his escape plan. And while they talked, the lift traveled toward Mercadia City.
Nice.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know if like seeing Atala was like, oh yoink, I got a plan, or if you already had a plan. I'm not sure.
It's like, oh, we're gonna escape on that one jovel.
Man, have you seen the size of that jovel?
Yeah, everybody climb on.
It's got 2 butts.
So the long lift ride ended in a narrow stone chamber. Once the lift doors opened, the riders were met with a set of large double doors that opened for them. They moved through the doorway into a larger chamber filled with more of the same double doors they had just passed through. One set of doors opened, and Gerard, Takara, and the rest of their lift's riders met with the other half of their contingent. Once the 2 groups had reorganized into one, they moved through the large passage at the end of the chamber they occupied. Once through the doorway, they were met by an even grander market than existed below. This was Mercadia City, and in the chaos of it, Gerard planned to escape with his crew. God, it's supposed to be so exhausting. Like, reading this book, I just thought, like, it's hot. I just want my ship. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I just want to go home.
It's like I'm getting in the middle of this fucking hot city. It's a market. I don't know where the fuck my ship
It
is.
stinks like garbage.
I need a portal. It's just, fuck me. So, escaping before that point would have been impossible. We mentioned the thing about the them being outnumbered by the Mercadian soldiers, but now that the 200 of them had been reduced to 2 scores, they had a much more realistic hope of escaping. So Gerard told Hannah to spread the word and to wait for his signal to attack, and they waited for him to make the first move. It's a pretty good plan, right? So Atala followed them in the next lift, and when Gerard saw him in the crowd, he called to him.
You there, kid.
Gerard called, gesturing to a familiar lad with tousled black hair.
I'm not a damned kid.
Atala spat back, though he gave a wink. He's 10. He's a kid.
Wink.
Bring me something to drink. Wine would be good.
Nodding, Atala darted away through the market. His cloak flashed tan beside a vintage stall. His hand darted atop a pile of burgeoning wineskins, and he snatched one. Holding it high, he waved the skin overhead and darted back toward Gerard. Why is he holding it overhead? Like, just hide it. You're a thief.
Look what I stole!
Look, I got it. I have never understood that either in, like, these climates. Even, like, in Game of Thrones, right? Like, they're all, like, hot and smelly and gross and probably dehydrated. And they're like, get me some wine. Like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
No, get me water.
Like,
Some nice
yeesh.
crotch warm wine.
Ugh.
Oh, and you know they're dribbling in their pants. Like, it also smells like pee-pee. So, by the time the morbidly obese wine seller called Atala a thief, the boy had already handed Gerard the wineskin to drink. Once Atala gave Gerard a sip of the wine, Gerard forced himself to vomit. Then he ordered the boy to dump the rest on the ground. He then told Atala to grab the Mercadian soldier's keys when he came to reprimand him and Atala for the theft.
Oh.
Yeah, he's got a plan. He's a smart guy.
He's
that
a
Gerard.
tricksy hobbit says.
Yeah, he's not that smart though, is he? So when the
good heroes are never actually like the super
Yeah.
smart.
That's why Han Solo is better than Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, the rogue one is always the smart one.
So when the wine merchant arrived and grabbed Atala by the collar, he threatened to cut the boy's hand off for stealing, to which Gerard informed the merchant that he had ordered Atala to grab the wineskin on the orders of their master. I got a master. Gerard told the merchant that he was a mere slave and that the leader of the Mercadian soldiers was his master, the one who had allegedly ordered the wine. Gerard told him that the wine tasted of poison, which is why he threw it up after drinking it, and why he told the boy to dump the rest of the wine. When the Mercadian captain arrived, he started barking orders at everyone involved, and in that commotion, Atala took the captain's keys off his belt, unlocked Gerard's shackles, and Gerard grabbed the trident the captain was holding, which is like kind of.
Yeah.
I think
Some
it's kind
security
of.
force.
I think it's kind of silly, but like if someone's not expecting it, it's really easy to grab something out of another person's hands. Just FYI, everybody.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and if you're like highly focused on like all this other shit that's going on,
just like it's easy to grab.
there's a commotion.
Yeah. So Gerard used the pole arm of the trident to on the side of the captain's face, and the Mercadian went down. He was unconscious before he hit the ground, but he's not dead.
And then he died.
No.
Damn it.
So while that little skerfluffle was occurring,
Kerfluffle.
it's one of my favorite words. Atala was crawling from prisoner to prisoner, unlocking their shackles. He freed Takara, then Stark, Sisay, and Hannah. Tongarth, on the other hand, was more impatient than the rest of the crew. In the commotion, the Minotaur lunged at a nearby soldier, grabbed his sword, and used it to break the chains in between the shackles.
Hell yeah.
Then he raised the sword up in front of him, and soldiers, merchants, and even Squee fell away in fear.
Even Squeeze.
Squeaker. Squee's like, no.
Ah. He's my ally. Ah.
Unlike the soldiers and merchants, Squee skittered toward a similarly imposing figure, Karn, and climbed up onto the silver golem's shoulders, thinking that the pacifist would be an island of calm in the sea of chaos. Once Squee was atop Karn's shoulders, Karn bit down on the chains that were holding the goblin shackles together. Then Karn asked,
Return the favor?
He asked Squee.
Lift one of my chains into my mouth.
Squee did. In moments, the whole massive chain and the goblin clinging to it cascaded down the street. Karn lifted his arms, dirt poured from the gritty joints, sunlight gleamed off his massive figure, and the crowd fell back again.
Ooh, shiny.
Yeah, they're like, ooh, this Minotaur, sexy, Karn, shiny. Most of the crew was free at that point, and they had been successful at keeping the Mercadian soldiers at bay in all the chaos. Even Karn was able to keep the soldiers running scared by yelling and waving his arms, because he's not going to fight.
Just like, oh, and just like waving them. Like when a bear comes, you're just like,
Yes. Well, and I think he's like 7 feet tall and changed. Like, I don't know. I don't exactly remember how tall he is, but he's big.
You know what? You know that that new art of Karn Liberated? That's what I'm thinking of right now.
I love you.
Yeah, Derpy Karn, like looking at his hands, like,
Oh, what do these do?
Poor Karn.
Oh, I love Karn. So Gerard began to spread the word that once the rest of the crew is free, they should cease fighting and spread out and blend with the crowd, and that they would regroup later on at a safer location. And that's when the giant arrived.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
A giant.
And I can't remember what art this is from, but it's something giant. So if you go on Scryfall and you want to search up giant, it's a red card. And I like the placement of his hair. Like, I guess I expected him to be hairier. Like, even I'm hairier than this. Not in the chest, but come on. Like, you don't have arm hair? What are you doing, buddy?
He's got
Come on,
some
what are you
nice
doing,
leg
giant?
hair.
yeah, look at those gams.
Look at those gams.
Yeah, he's got like forearm hair.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I don't have, like, upper arm hair, to be fair. But I definitely do. Like, the legs, my legs, whew, you don't want to know. So he was the giant was roughly twice the height of Karn, and his bulk resembled that of a small house. And
He's a house.
he's a brick house. And he was under the command of the Mercadian soldiers. As they prodded the bulky form of the giant toward Gerard, Tongarth, Karn, and Squee, Gerard ordered Karn to engage it before it reached them, to which the golem replied,
I will not fight.
The pacifist called back. It was a foolish announcement there and then. Soldiers approached the golem. In exasperation, Gerard flattened another guard and shouted,
If you won't fight him, detain him.
Oh,
I don't know. Dance with him.
dance.
Karn asked as the giant loomed up.
Hold him tight. That's an order.
So Karn grabbed the giant by the waist, lifted him off the ground, and began to spin.
Whee!
And after a few
so
steps, Karn also began to whistle a tune he'd hear his fellow crew members whistling aboard Weatherlight.
Oh my gosh, that's so wholesome.
So does actually start dancing with them.
Yeah.
So with that taken care of, and their fellow crew members disappearing into the crowd, Gerard, Tongarth, and Atala thought that they had their escape well in hand. Then they noticed what the Mercadian soldiers situated on the other end of the road they occupied were up to. From among the group of beaten soldiers, a creature with glowing orange eyes that sat in a skull molded of rippling green muscle emerged and began to lumber toward Gerard, Tongarth, and Atala. 2 pairs of bug-like mandibles extended from the creature's cheeks and jowls. A pair of human-like arms ending in claws sprouted from its shoulders, with another pair of similar arms sprouting right behind the first set. The creature's upper body was perched on legs worthy of a drake with talons on each foot. Gerard called to Atala, asking what the thing was. Atala informed his new allies that it was a Cateran enforcer.
They're the meanest mercenaries the Mercadians have. I'm getting out of here. You should too. Your folk are all free.
That was a good 10-year-old. That's
Thanks.
good. That was very good, honey. So sincere. Gerard then ordered any crew in earshot that they should scatter, and all did, except for Karn, who was still dancing with the giant, and Tongarth, who strode up to stand beside Gerard.
It has 4 arms, so I thought we should as well.
The Minotaurs said. Gerard smiled grimly as the thing came on.
You could never resist a fight.
Man, these guys, they're so tight now.
Yeah, they're buddies.
Love it.
They're
So,
buddies.
Yeah.
by that point, the Cateran had reached the 2 and threw itself at them in a vicious attack. It jumped on top of Tongarth, while Gerard found himself on top of the Cateran. Tongarth was able to stab the creature in the belly until he realized that the sword's metal was no match for the creature's hide. Just like, can't even stab. It's like Kevlar. So,
What is this thing? Jeez.
yeah. So for Gerard's part, the Cateran had managed to grab the man's head in one of its giant hands and was slowly pulling it toward its mouth. Then, before either of them knew it, the Cateran had Tongarth's head in one of its other hands. And now it was a race to see which head would reach the creature's mouth first. It seemed there was no escape for the 2 heroes, and then the creature bit down on something round, and its mouth was filled with red pulp and black seeds. It was Squee. Yeah, he didn't run away. This is really
story.
like Squee's time to shine. He's going to have other times, but this is one of those times. So instead of listening to Gerard and scattering, the goblin had grabbed a melon and thrust it into the Cateran's mouth. Realizing this, the creature dropped both Gerard and Tongarth, and in that instant, Squee pulled free the other half of the melon. I wonder if he cut it beforehand or if it was already cut.
Maybe he ripped it in 2.
Maybe. And he took the other half of the melon and smashed it into the Cateran's eyes. The Cateran quickly wiped the pulverized fruit from its face and lunged at the goblin. Squee shielded his face and cringed in anticipation of death. He thought any second he would feel the creature's teeth and claws tear into his flesh. But when none did, he cautiously opened his eyes and looked around. Squee saw that the Cateran had stopped mid-lunge and was now sitting on its knees and looking up at Squee with fear in its eyes. Gerard and Tongarth also stared at Squee with surprise on their faces. Through jagged fangs, the Cateran pleaded.
Forgive me, master.
Oh, wow.
Squee looked over his shoulder to see who the beast addressed.
He's talking to you, Squee.
Gerard hissed nervously. Squee splayed a hand on his chest and mouthed.
To Squee?
So, remember
Yeah, it's hilarious.
at the top of this episode when we mentioned that the Kirin are the highest of the caste systems in Mercadia City. So, because Squee was a goblin, he was paid the same respect as any Kirin or any goblin on Mercadia. So when the Cateran saw that it was a goblin who'd smashed the melon in its face, he stopped in his tracks and begged forgiveness. The Cateran wasn't aware that Gerard and Tongarth were his friends, and he told the goblin that it was just following orders.
I didn't even know Caterans existed, and this card is like the art you have here is actually from a card called Cateran Enforcer from Mercadian Masques.
Yeah, and it's a whole there are a few, like if you like search Caterin on Scryfall, it's all like that mercenary type, cuz like Mercadian Masques had the mercenaries and then Nemesis had the rebels.
Rebels, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's 6 mercenaries and then there's 1 sorcery that has Caterin in it.
Yeah, and they're pretty scary. I think it's just like a faction. I don't think they specifically have the they always have 4 arms, but the Caterin informed Squee that his rank exceeded the Mercadian soldier, and that that had given the Caterin its orders to attack the Weatherlight captives, and it doubled down and asked Squee what his orders for it were. A broad smile on his face, Squee took a deep breath.
Yes, orders. Master Squeeze orders.
Yes.
Dance with that giant.
Squee said.
Karn's bushed. We're gonna go get something to drink.
Yes, master.
So their escape was relatively easy after that, and even the Mercadian reinforcements only saw the Caterin and the giant dancing together.
This whole like scene is so like wholesome. It's like, I'm gonna get you with some fruit and I'm gonna dance you into submission.
Moving on to the next part here. Over the next 2 days, Weatherlight's crew hid out in Mercadia City. They had all found or stolen Mercadian clothes to help them blend in with the locals, except for Karn, of course. So while the rest of the crew was relatively free to move through the city streets, Karn had to keep his silver shell hidden in the city's dark alleys during the day. And this is something that always kind of I sort of nitpick about stories when characters have to steal clothes or find clothes, and they often find clothes that just immediately fit. And I'm not saying that's what happened here, but it's like, how many clothes do you have to go through before you find clothes that fit you? And not even...
I mean, if something's a little baggy, you can still wear it.
Right,
right. Yeah.
And that's the thing, but not even clothes that fit you, like, will fit you enough, but even clothes, like, certainly clothes that fit you, like, just right. Like, I think that's even more uncommon.
Just like Gerard and Karn going to an Old Navy and like going through a stack of clothes to see what can fit them.
Karn's like, oh wait, I have some Old Navy dollars.
You can't find anything that fits you at an Old Navy. I don't care who you are.
Well,
I don't know who
actually,
they make
over here
clothes
they
for.
have an old Mercadian.
There you go. Yeah. He's like disappointed when like the pants rip.
It's like
It's all just distressed clothing that's all dirty and sandy.
Yeah.
So Squee was the only member of the crew that was truly free. Being a goblin, Kieran to the rest of Mercadia meant that he was able to conduct his business however he wanted. Because of this, Squee was able to secure discreet lodgings for Weatherlight's bridge crew.
Nice.
By the time that happened, the streets of Mercadia City were buzzing with what had occurred when Weatherlight's crew arrived in the city as captives, although the series of events had become quite exaggerated.
They defeated 1,000 of the city guards, fought off 20 giants, and killed a whole band of Caterin enforcers. Tavern talk made them outlaw heroes, striking out against oppression. Garrison talk made them slightly outlaws, but their names were mentioned only in tremulous whispers. Legendary Gerard, giant killer.
Hey!
The legend of Gerard and his band reached a fevered pitch by next afternoon. It was time to enact his plan.
Oh, and he enacted his plan. Gerard, with Takara in tow, traveled to the Magistrate's Tower, which was the seat of power in Mercadia City, and a super annoying card if you're trying to equip a creature with an equipment. So when they are, and I thank Will for that. I miss playing Magic with Will. Will, if you're listening, I like playing with you.
You're doing a wink and a finger gun.
Wink.
Yeah.
So,
Wink.
So when they arrived, they entered the tower unnoticed by the stream of Mercadians that were climbing up and down the stairs and passing in and out of the various entrances. Once inside, the two climbed a set of stairs that wound through the middle of the building until they were at the very top, where the magistrate's audience chamber was located. Gerard and Takara pushed the door to the chamber open, traveled down a short hallway, and found themselves in a large circular chamber. In the very center of the chamber was a small platform where the chief magistrate of Mercadia sat.
God bless him, or whatever it was.
I think look at them hands, they're like meaty.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's like you can always tell.
sausage
You can
hands.
always tell by the hands. I'm not being woke here. I'm not. This is about him, not about people. So the magistrate was short, fat, and balding, and we're talking like 6 chins fat. His face was also liberally coated with rouge and powder, and it had to be reapplied several times each day because he would sweat it off. Which is, where's that sweat going? Right? It's like it's got to go somewhere. All that makeup and sweat, like it doesn't just evaporate. That's going somewhere. So he also smelled bad, and he smelled like he hadn't bathed in several weeks, and he hadn't. Right? It's not like they don't have running water. They're dumping their poop out. So from this platform, the magistrate watched Gerard and Takara approach him, and as they got closer, they saw that the magistrate was surrounded by a group of courtiers, and they were also lounging around. The magistrate called out to them in High Mercadian, to which Takara translated.
The magistrate asks who you are and what you offer to approach his exalted figure.
Gerard offered the magistrate a bargain, and that's when the first of the magistrate's Kieran advisors popped out from behind the magistrate.
Most respected magistrate of Mercadia, may the gods bless you and keep your name.
Observed the Kieran.
Does not your ineffable wisdom truly spread whenever the name of Mercadia is known? Might a humble servant of your divine mightiness presume to offer some small tidbit of advice on the matter of this stranger?
The magistrate gestured meaninglessly. The goblin continued.
Would it not be proper and advisable to determine why we should give any audience to a brigand? Would it not be advisable to call the city wizards, or, failing them, the city guard, or, failing them, the city waste managers?
Don't besmirch the garbage man.
Smirch.
The Kieran veered a bit too close to Takara, and she lunged out to grab it by the throat and lifted it up with one hand. The wrathy woman demanded that they listen to the terms of the deal, and after a bit of a standoff with the guards, Takara released the goblin, and they decided to listen. Based on the pitiful fighting skills of the Mercadian soldiers, Gerard offered to train the magistrate's army. In exchange, and once the army was trained, Gerard would lead the army to Rushwood in order to rescue Weatherlight and any other crew. In addition to that, Gerard demanded that Mercadian facilities be made available for Weatherlight's repairs and Mercadian assistance in finding power stones to repair Weatherlight's plane-shifting crystal. And 1,000 gold for Tavut for damage done to his farm.
And all the dead bodies he had to get rid of.
Yeah, exactly. So they had a bit of a back and forth, and finally the magistrate answered.
The bargain is accepted, legendary Gerard, giant killer. Train our troops, and your folk will be treated as citizens and honored guests. You will be granted the right to lead a division to regain your ship. If you regain your ship, you will be allowed to use our facilities to repair it and benefit from our assistance in obtaining power stones to complete the job. And 1,000 gold pieces will be granted to the farm family you mentioned. Agreed.
Boom, just like that. Got him.
Excellent.
So, great magistrate voice, by the way, Riley.
Yeah, it was good.
Training the army took about a month and a half before they marched for Rushwood to retrieve Weatherlight. And in that time, Orem continued to live with the Cho Aram.
Oh yeah, Orem's over
She's
there.
like, call me Cho Orem.
Oh!
Hey.
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't even think of that. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, she, while she was living with them, she learned quite a bit. Chomano taught her how to harness her magical ability to heal, as well as the Cho Aram language, because they speak a different language. I don't think I mentioned that. She also learned why they had stolen Weatherlight. Seeing Weatherlight's common-tory arrival across the sky, the Cho Aram believed Weatherlight to be their god, Ramos, falling from the sky. An old myth about Ramos falling from the heavens and breaking into pieces, and all the evils of Mercadia arose from his broken body. One day, Ramos was supposed to return when the pieces of his body were reunited. Then the world would unite and drive all evil away.
And the world will be as one.
It sounds nice, but it doesn't really work because if you don't, you need evil because then the good is meaningless. Anyways,
Yeah, because
they-
otherwise it's just bland.
yeah, it's just bland.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they thought Weatherlight was a piece of Ramos or some kind of new uniter, new version of Ramos, and Orm tried explaining what the airship was and its origin, but sometimes it can be hard to argue with belief, as I'm sure we...
That would be a really annoying conversation because it's like, okay, I see what you're saying, but like seriously, this is our flying ship.
Yeah.
We made this.
I was on that ship.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So the real story surrounding Ramos began all the way back on Phyrexia. And we don't know for sure when this dragon engine was built, but it was definitely before negative 5,000 AR. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the AR time measurement is the Argivian reckoning, and that is the year zero of AR is when the year that Urza and Mishra were born. They were born in the same year, so that's what we're looking at.
Oh yeah, because Urza was at the beginning of the year and Mishra was at the end of the year.
That's right. And then on the last day of the year, they're like equals or something, but not really because it's when you were born. So, anyways, a few years before the Brothers' War broke out, Mishra was a slave to a desert tribe on Dominaria. One night, he had a dream, and in that dream, he somehow found Ramos. I'm not sure if he traveled to Phyrexia or if there was some kind of portal connecting the two, but Mishra was able to bring the dragon engine to the desert where he slept. The rest of the story is history that you can find out from listening to our Brothers' War series, which starts on episode 67. I think that's a 4-parter. But what you won't find out from that series is that sometime during the war, Urza's faction captured Ramos and reprogrammed him to protect the people of Dominaria in case they were wiped out in the conflict. Like, they legitimately didn't even put it in the book. So this is sort of like... it's kind of like retroactive. But anyways, during the Silex blast that ended the war, Ramos gathered as many humans and merfolk as he could from around Argoth and plane shifted to Phyrexia, then plane shifted again using the erratic portal that was at the time still on Phyrexia. The portal took Ramos and the rescued Mercadians, and the rescued to Mercadia, where he thought they would be safe. On their descent after arriving, Ramos dropped the rescued, then accidentally crashed into a Mercadian city, killing all the inhabitants.
Oops.
So it's kind of six of one, half a dozen of the other, I guess. So the people he had brought with him from Dominaria had been saved, but the pieces of Ramos were indeed scattered, and the people he saved became the Cho Aram of Rushwood, which we already know about. The merfolk that Ramos brought to Mercadia settled on and around an island near the southern coast. Their domain was called Soprazo, and the rest of the humans that Ramos brought to Mercadia settled on the southern coast. Their city was called Rashada.
Nice.
Which is nice. I like that. That's a nice
Rishadan
name.
Port.
If we have another child, let's name him Rashada.
No.
Okay. So Rashada and Soprazo were relatively close, and it wasn't uncommon to see merfolk on the crowded streets of Rashada. And much like the relationship that Mercadia City had with the Rushwood, Rashada and Soprazo were considered enemy territory. Just to be clear, Rashada and Soprazo weren't enemies. Rushwood, Rashada, and Soprazo were all enemies with Mercadia City, which was not dissimilar to the dynamic of the stronghold on Wrath and the small cities and villages that the core Vec and Dal tried to maintain. So, there was one more faction of people that Ramos brought to Mercadia. They were the Ramosians. They didn't have a city like the other factions. They were a group of rebels that worked against the rule of the Kirin on Mercadia, and they were like the most devoted to the Ramos myth, hence the name Ramosians. We'll explain more about Rashada and Soprazo and the Ramosians when some of our heroes travel to their cities later on in this story. But for now, we'll get back to Orm's time with the Cho Aram. Remember the character that Orm saved shortly after she was imprisoned by the Cho Aram? Ishada?
Yeah.
Well, in that first month that Orm spent in the Rushwood, she and Ashada became good friends. Orm would tell Ashada about her life on Dominaria, and Ashada would do the same for Orm and her life on Mercadia. I forgot it for a second. The Cho Aram leader, Cho Mano, and Orm also fell in love during this time period. Yeah.
Thought so.
Holy.
And as you should have called it.
You know?
And as much as Orm enjoyed her new, peaceful life in Rushwood, she wondered what had become of her friends and what would become of Weatherlight. Then, one night, Orm woke from a nightmare filled with monsters. Inhuman beasts with 4 arms, boar heads, scorpion tails. They had breached the vast forest walls, the trees created around the Cho Aram village, and they were killing many Cho Aram. Not just the warriors, but the women, children, and the elders. And not just killing, but tearing them to pieces. But it was just a nightmare, right? Anytime anyone uses the not just the men routine, I always think of Star Wars. Right? Like when Anakin's like, I didn't just kill the men.
Yeah.
So Chomano entered Orm's room and was pleased to see that she was already awake, but it wasn't a booty call. When Orm began to tell him about her dream, Chomano told her that he and many others had had the same dream, but it wasn't a dream. It was Rushwood speaking to them telepathically.
Ooh.
I don't know about the future.
It's me, the forest. Some bad's gonna happen.
So the monsters, who were Cateran and Mercadian alike, were on their way through the Rushwood to the Cho Aram village to take Weatherlight, and the forest had woken the Cho Aram up to defend itself. So, Cho Mano gathered up the warriors in the village for an offensive against the monsters, while Orm and the rest of the healers gathered up those who could not fight and waited until their healing skills were needed. This next part is pretty gruesome. In addition to the scary Cateran enforcers, the group of Mercadians attacking the Cho Aram was composed of things with humanoid bodies, boar heads, as well as things with scorpion tails that release deadly venom. And
Just like the nightmare.
yes, just like the nightmare. So the book did mention that there were quite a few weird-looking creatures like this when Weatherlight's crew arrived at the outskirts of Mercadia City. So the author didn't just like suddenly throw these at us. I just didn't mention them. Didn't seem important at that time, and I thought I'd get more of a get more of a wow factor. So
wow.
What are these things?
So when Chomano arrived at the edge of his village that had become a battleground, the forest was bathed in blood and the bodies of his people and their enemies. The Cho Aram were putting up a good fight, but they were outnumbered 4-1. Even the unarmored archers, who were having difficulty seeing in the near full darkness, had joined the fray. Their arrows barely traveled the arm's length into the eye sockets of Cateran enforcers, which is about as far as they could see. At one point, Chomano saw a Cateran rip the armor from the body of a Cho Aram warrior it was fighting. Then it plunged one of its 4 arms into the warrior's chest and literally ripped out the man's still beating heart, which is that's a great TKO.
Fuck.
Whoa.
Yeah, fatality.
Yeah, I was going to say fatality.
Flawless victory.
Next, he saw one of the boar-headed beasts drive its tusks beneath a woman's jaw, impaling her head and whipping her back and forth until her jaw ripped off. Then he saw one of the scorpion men sink its stinger into an archer's eye and proceed to pump its venom into the archer's brain, killing him.
But first he
Holy
passed
crap.
out.
Yeah,
And then
there's
he
no
died.
point
And
any
died.
punches here.
It's like, yeah, these are real gruesome kills. Just like getting in those details.
Oh yeah. So the tide of battle turned when the Cho Aram wizards arrived. They used all the spilled blood to create an army of animated blood soldiers. Seeing as how blood is
neat.
mostly water, and the Cho Aram were skilled at controlling water, they formed pools of it into the shape of men.
That's cool.
They didn't have weapons though, so
Bloodbend.
They were just wet men.
yeah.
Pretty scary.
But the first blood warrior came face to face with the Cateran. It shoved its gory fist down the Cateran's throat, first to the elbow, then to the shoulder, until the Cateran drowned in Cho Aram blood.
Oh.
Once
Dang.
Once the wizards had done the work of thinning the Mercadian strike force, Chomano and his warriors moved in to kill any who were left. Then Orm and the rest of the Cho-Aram healers swept the battlefield for any who required medical attention. So they just used the blood warriors to, take out the trash.
Yeah, just start cutting off limbs, right?
Chomano joined Orm and the other healers in their work post-battle, and she asked him,
Why are the Mercadians attacking us?
Chomano's eyes were dark in his handsome face.
They came to capture the Weatherlight.
So, Chomano was correct in that the Mercadians were there to retrieve Weatherlight, but he and the rest of the Cho-Aram thought that was because Weatherlight was part of their god, Ramos. But the Mercadians actually wanted to steal Weatherlight so they could renege on their deal with Gerard. And the Mercadians, if they did that, they would get their army trained and they would keep the skyship, but that's obviously not what happened. So the Mercadian strike force was slaughtered by the Cho-Aram, and Weatherlight remained in the Rushwood. So about 2 weeks after that, so we're getting to like the 6-week mark of how long it took the army to train. The Mercadians sent this strike force in like a month after Gerard started training them, and now we're at 2 weeks later when the army is fully trained. Gerard found out about the initial attack on the Cho-Aram in the Rushwood Forest, realizing that the Mercadians and the Kirin were attempting to circumvent the terms of their deal. Gerard doubled down on the training of the Mercadian army, and it was time to send them in. So after hearing that the Catarins had been slaughtered by the Cho-Aram, Gerard told everyone that they wouldn't have been if they'd been trained by him and his bridge crew. Gerard had this to say about his soldiers.
In 6 weeks, every last one had dropped in weight and bulked their muscles. They had learned to fight hard and bather afterwards.
Do you really? I don't think you're supposed to lose weight if you're bulking up your muscles.
Yeah, maybe he's got some
that's
weird like
how that works.
Yeah, he's got some weird ideas about like training.
They were all pudgy before.
Yeah, they were like
now
soft
they're...
boys.
Yeah. And Gerard couldn't be like, they lost this much fat percentage and they, had some gains because he's, not living in the world of Instagram and all that jazz.
Yeah, he doesn't have Noom.
No.
So, needless to say, a fighting force that knows when to bathe is a match for anything.
You're a goof.
Now, before we move on to the part of the story where Gerard leads his Mercadian army into the Rushwood, we'd like to mention a conversation between Tongarth and Hannah. In our Wrath and Storm series, we may have mentioned that Tongarth was quite vain. He came from a culture that was concerned with the appearances of its members, and our Minotaur friend was no exception. On top of all of that, Tongarth was one of the most exceptional physical specimens among Minotaurs, and he was proud of it. And we know from our last series that Tongarth's torture not only made him bigger and stronger, and he probably dropped some weight, but it also twisted him into a mutated version of his former self. His fur turned from burgundy to blotchy white, with portions missing. He was covered in scars, and his horns became inverted. And this was really the genius of Volrath's torture. He was often able to intuit his victims' most self-rewarding qualities and take them away. So, getting back to Hannah and Tongarth, one afternoon, while Tongarth was taking a break from training Mercadian soldiers, Hannah asked the Minotaur to sit with her.
Come, my friend, sit down.
She tugged at Tongarth's tunic. He cleared his throat and knelt by her side with every appearance of reluctance.
Do you want to tell me what the matter is, Tongarth?
No, you wouldn't understand.
Perhaps I would. Suppose I tell you what I think is troubling you, and you tell me if I'm wrong.
He stared sullenly into the middle distance where the tower of the magistrate rose against the lemon sky. Hannah followed his gaze.
You were hurt in the stronghold. However, Volrath didn't only torture you, he altered you. So much I've already heard from Gerard. But I think there's something else to be said. I think you're afraid of something.
Afraid?
Hannah shrank back at the Minotaur's roar.
I'm afraid of nothing.
He looked at her and blew a deep breath through his great nostrils.
Yet you are right. I would prefer I had died on Wrath.
Hannah sighed in exasperation.
Oh, really? Well, that would be a lot of help to us here, wouldn't it? Then we'd be mourning you and Miri.
She leaned back, appraising the Minotaur.
Is it the physical changes that bother you?
Tongarth stared silently into space. When Hannah started to get up, he spoke.
Ever since I was a tiny calf, I was told how handsome I was. I thought myself the handsomest of any Minotaur in my tribe. I was more than handsome. I was beautiful.
He turned and looked her full in the face.
Among my people, destinies are written in our faces, our bodies. I knew I would grow up to be a great warrior because I looked like a great warrior.
Hannah said thoughtfully.
Surely there must be more to being a warrior than looking the part.
And you know what? What did Yoda say to Luke? Wars not make one great.
There is no do. No, shit.
No.
There is no try.
Yeah, just
Only
just
do.
do it. Just try and I'm gonna try his loser talk. I think he said that too.
Super shit the bed on that one. Oof.
So
try, only do.
Cute.
well, Violet has a new bear, and she names all her bears. And it's I was digging for a name, and I came up with Doo Doo Bear, and she started saying it.
Aw, that
Yeah.
is really cute.
It's because the bear's
Duty
brown like poop.
And it's like dark. It's like dark brown. So Tarngarth Tarngarth was upset about his new appearance, but Hannah basically explained that she would follow Gerard if he looked like Squee or any other diminutive creature because Gerard acted like a hero. And Tarngarth decided that maybe he had been paying too much mind to his appearance, and that Hannah was right. And honestly, I think the torture Tongarth suffered on Wrath in the Stronghold was... honestly, I think the guy's kind of got PTSD rather than low self-esteem.
Yeah, I've often thought that, like, if I were to be tortured and then maimed because of it, you know, it would be even harder to, like, let it go because you would be seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just reminded
Yeah.
of it all the time.
Yes.
But you know, like, and I
Yeah.
think I mentioned this in our Wrath and Storm series, like, the torture had almost the opposite effect because, you know, the last stage of it was to make Tongarth more docile. He was Volrath planned on making Tongarth Grevin's second in command on Predator, and you know it was supposed to make him bigger and stronger, which it did. And you know Hannah's right. Like if he had died on Wrath, you know, yeah, that would have really helped them where they're at right now. So yeah, you know, I just wanted to mention that. You know, this is sort of a thing for Tongarth, and you know, I guess there's more important things than having straight horns.
Deep.
Anyways, a few. He is.
Tongarth's
he's
great, though.
fantastic. So a few days after the 6 weeks of training the Mercadian army had elapsed, Gerard led select members of his crew, 100 Mercadian soldiers, and a contingent of Cateran enforcers into the Rushwood Forest to retrieve Weatherlight and rescue any crew that still lived. Gerard wasn't thrilled with the Caterans accompanying them, but the magistrate ordered it at the last minute, so Gerard thought he shouldn't refuse. It took them about a day to march to the outskirts of Rushwood and another day to infiltrate the forest. It was on their second night of travel that the commotion began. It's always a commotion. I feel like I use that word a lot. Gerard, Takara...
You can always say skerfuffle.
I do like Skerfluffle, but I try to save Skerfluffle for a real Skerfluffle.
It's skerfuffle, not skerfluffle.
Oh, okay. Well,
But I like
it's all
it.
made up anyway.
Keep saying it your way.
Yeah,
I like it better.
Tomato to tomato.
Mulatto. Yeah.
So Gerard, Takara, Tongarth, Sisay, the Mercadian soldiers, and the Cateran had made camp that night in the forest. Their jovial mounts slept without saddles or packs in a big feline pile, while the rest of them slept in their damp surroundings.
Cozy.
Yeah, they're very cozy.
Man, I love cats.
They're great. The Cateran part of their this is a really like cat-friendly podcast. I think Riley's the only one that has a dog.
Yeah, but
Well-
I also have a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're like Magic the Gathering in general seems to be very pro cat. Like there's a lot of
Yeah, it's not until recently that we gotten dogs.
Yeah. I mean, my cat's name is Miri.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And on her license, her last name is Weatherlight Duelist.
What's that?
I said on her license, her last name is Weatherlight Duelist.
No, it's actually Princess, because we kind of conceded to Gaia's name. Gaia wanted to name our cat Princess, and we said, well, her last name can be Princess.
Okay, perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's what it is like on the records. She's Miri
it's
Princess.
Miri Princess.
Excellent.
So the Cateran part of their group was commanded by a four-armed beast called Zizrik. He had orders from Gerard to tell his men not to attack unless they were attacked first. But that piece of shit found a loophole in Gerard's order. That night, while most of their group was camping, Zizrik and a few of his men noticed several sets of eyes watching them, and he decided to let a crossbow bolt fly. That bolt struck one of the watchers between the eyes. The other watchers sounded the proverbial alarm, and it was pretty much all downhill from there. As soon as Gerard realized what was going on, he asked Zizrik what he had done, and the Cateran commander told Gerard that the pair of eyes had looked at him wrong. He's like, he's eyeballing me, and that Gerard's order was for him not to attack. He figured the order didn't extend to him, and there you have the loophole. This guy's just he's a real winner.
Yeah.
Knowing that Zizrik had basically just declared war against the forest, Gerard ordered everyone awake to arms and to light the camp's perimeter fires. Then the camp was inundated with all manner of forest beasts, and Gerard decided that if they stayed where they were, the camp would become their grave. And then they died. No, I'm kidding. So he ordered his men to push deeper into the forest until they found Weatherlight, which wasn't far off. By the time they reached their destination, about a quarter of the soldiers had been killed, while very few of the Caterans had died. What was left of them rode on about 50 of the remaining Jovals, with the Cateran group riding ahead of them. After facing off a few of the Rushwood's forest elementals, the Cateran broke through the perimeter of the Cho-Aram village and continued their attack. The Cho-Aram weren't as prepared for their attack, though, as the first one, I mean. So I guess Rushwood kind of dropped the ball on that one. Like I said, Gerard and the rest of the Mercadian were a bit behind the Cateran group. Awoken by the Cateran, Chomano and Orim began to run through the village, telling anyone who could hear them to bar the doors to their huts, and they split up to cover more ground, and Orim ran into Ishada and a group of other Cho-Aram. Just as Orim was telling Ishada to hide from the invaders, she heard an angry hiss, and Ishada stopped suddenly. Orim saw two black feathered arrows protruding from Ishada's chest and right shoulder.
Oof.
And she was dead before she reached the ground. And then she died.
No time to pass out though.
No, R.I.P. Ishada. She's dead. Orim then led as many Cho-Aram who were not capable of fighting away from the village as she could. They eventually reached the river that bifurcated the forest and the canoes that waited there. Orim got as many people as she could into canoes. Then she waited as more Cho-Aram came running from the village toward the river. She found out that Cho-Aram had been killed by the invaders from one of the Cho-Aram, and so that's it for that guy too.
You mean Chomano?
Chomano. Yes, Chomano's. Then he died. He's.
Wow.
She loved him
Yeah.
too.
And
She had Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
and that's another one of our characters having her heart broken. So R.I.P. Chomano. What a great name. And the book didn't detail how or who killed him, but it did explain that once Gerard's troops arrived in the village, they were shocked by what the Caterans had done to it. Much like their first attack against the Cho-Aram, the Caterans had brutalized them. It's like
I like how they give all these like detailed kills for things, and then it's just like,
Yeah.
Chomano's dead.
seems like a.
Yeah, they really go
And he
into
died.
detail. And then he died.
And then he died.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of that.
Yeah, the civilians that are killed, it's like gruesome and detailed. But yeah, these main characters, just
So by that point, the Cho Aram weren't putting up much of a fight, and most that still lived had fled into the forest, and they had also left Weatherlight behind. So Gerard ordered his men to stop the attack and regroup near the skyship. The Mercadian soldiers under his command did so, but the Cateran enforcers under Zizrik's command continued to slaughter any Cho Aram that remained in the village, probably old people. So Gerard ordered his men to stop the Cateran by any means. Gerard then led his men on Jovelback and attacked the Cateran. They killed quite a few before Zizrik ordered his men to stop. With the battle finally ended, Gerard ordered a portion of his men to secure Weatherlight and another portion to round up any Cho Aram that remained in the village. Among them was Oren, and when Gerard saw that she was still alive, he was delighted. Orem was less than thrilled to see her friends, though, especially Gerard. When he saw her, he said,
Orem, you're still alive. It's good to see you.
Kravchak,
she hissed.
I wish I weren't alive. I would gladly die if I could bring back all the people you slaughtered today.
Orem?
Gerard asked wonderingly. The healer glared at him. Her eyes were dancing with sparks.
Look at what you have done, Gerard. Look who you have brought with you.
She gestured to the Mercadians and Caterans who stood watching her curiously.
We came to rescue you, to recover the ship. What's the matter with you? I thought you'd be glad to see us. I thought...
You thought nothing. You're just like them. You only take things. You never give. Instead, you take, and always with the point of a sword. What about Ashada and all the others?
She gestured to where a few of the Mercadian soldiers were still piling corpses.
What about Chomano?
Her voice caught, and then she recovered herself.
They paid the price for your greed.
Ooh, ouch. Don't bring Chomano up. It's too soon.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's totally fair to accuse Gerard of being greedy for wanting to get his stolen ship back. But in any case, he explained that the massacre they had all just witnessed was perpetrated by the Caterans, which is exactly why Gerard attacked them after they wouldn't stop killing the Cho Aram. And Orm and Gerard basically decided to agree to disagree. But just when they did, Zizrik sidled up to them, still covered in gore from head to toe. He informed Gerard that Weatherlight had been secured, and Gerard told the Cateran commander that, I'm in the middle of somebody. To which Zizrik replied,
Yes, you are.
The Cateran hissed. He seized Gerard's wrists and locked shackles over them. Gerard spun in sudden shock.
What is this?
You are under arrest, Commander.
Zizrik said, grinning. Sisse reached for her sword, only to have shackles snap close over her wrists too. A whole party of Cateran enforcers surrounded them.
Arrest? And what's the charge?
Murder of those in your command.
Zizrik said.
You ordered the Mercadian Guard to attack my forces. You yourself killed 2 of my soldiers.
This is ludicrous.
Gerard growled. Orm was also in prison now aboard Weatherlight. Tongarth and Dakara stood, similarly chained.
You have no authority.
On the contrary, the magistrate himself hired me and my band. He anticipated such treachery from you. I am empowered to imprison you and your co-conspirators and press into service whatever Cho Aram wizards and workers are needed to convey Weatherlight back to Mercadia. Now I am finished with you. Take him to the Jovel Cora.
Nice. And just like that, the bridge crew of Weatherlight was marched back to Mercadia City as enemies of the state. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 2 of Mercadian Masques.
Ooh.
Yeah, so next week we'll cover their return to Mercadia City, their imprisonment, and then we're going to get to know Soprazo and Rashada a little bit more.
It's going to be a great surpriso.
There you go. Yeah. Check us out on Instagram, Turn One Soul Ring, the podcast. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Turn One Soul Ring. Anywhere out there, just Turn One Soul Ring, the podcast. and we'd like to hear from you. So thank you all for listening. We're going to be back next week with part 2 of this series. This is going to be a 3-part series, so you have that to look forward to. Ainsley, thank you for joining us,
My
as
pleasure.
always. Eric and Riley, thanks for being here, guys, and we'll talk to
Yeah.
everybody next week.
Hell yeah.
It's always a lot of fun.
Bye now.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
then he died.
He died.
And he
And
died.
then he died.
Turn one soul ring.